Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1992 Score football set. 92 and 93 were an interesting period in football where it was basically the years where football companies had to scale back. Not that there were a lot of companies that needed to do that, but the first place where we saw a Series 2 set was in football with Pro Set. 1989, and by 1990, Score joined Pro Set in having two series releases. And in 1991, Pro Set Platinum also joined the ranks of having two series, as well as Pacific. And then in 1992, Upper Deck joined as well in having two series. So football was increasing at a pretty rapid pace, but things got so crowded so quickly in football that all of a sudden companies started scaling back. So starting in 1992, Score was the first case where they dropped from two series down to just one. And in 1993, Pro Set, Upper Deck, and Pacific all dropped back down to just a single series. So by 1994, when Ultra became a two-series set, and it would be just about the only case in football where there would be two series moving forward, everybody else had already moved on. But like I said, Score was the first one of those companies to do that, and in doing so, things definitely were changing for Score quite a bit, because when Score launched in 1989, they made a bold card. They were going to make a bold statement about we are the football brand, and they had to compete with Pro Set. And so in 1990, they both brought their A games, and Pro Set got the edge on Score. But in 1991, Score continued to make a really impressive card, trying to outdo Pro Set as the football card. The problem was that in 1991, there was a lot that went on, because already you had Action Pack that was a premium brand in football. But in 1991, you picked up Ultra, you picked up Stadium Club, you picked up Platinum, not that it mattered, but you also picked up Pinnacle, so even Score was making a higher end card. And so that meant that Score itself suddenly got surpassed by everything else. So why are you making perhaps the best looking card in football cards if that's not what people are going to be collecting? Don't you want to put that energy into Pinnacle as opposed to into Score? So that begs the question with Score, well, what is this? Well, it became a cheap brand. And while the identity of the company always wanted to not be that, they realized that's what they were. So they were the card set for the kids, not for the adults, for the kids. So 1992 comes around, they do a single series, and the design, let's just say, was bold. My word, this was bold. Almost a nod back to the 1989 set. The card is very simple and has, it looks like the kind of thing you would see in a Trapper Keeper. I mean, this really does look like pop art for kids. It doesn't make it a bad looking card, not at all. It just doesn't have the same, it's not built to impress collectors. It is built to impress kids and get them excited about collecting cards. At the end of the day, that's really what these cards are about. Even on the card back, this is a nod back to the 1989 set where there's very little information on the back. It's simple, straightforward, gets in, gets the job done, and that's about it. But I did say that it was a single series, a single release. And it was interesting the way they approached this, because in baseball, they did 660 card sets. In football, they did a 330 card set in 89, and then two of those, totaling 660 cards, in 1990. And again, they did a 330 set and 330 card set in 91 with additional Dream Team cards extending it. So you would assume a single series would be just 330 cards, right? No. In 1992, they made a 550 card set, still in 110 card increments, because that's the size of the printing sheets that they were printing. But that meant that they had 5 colors to go with, and so the 5 colors they went with were blue, purple, green, black, and white was the last group, 441 through 550. So those were the 5 different colors. You'll notice they didn't use red, which I'm very thankful for, because that would not have looked good on these cards. Instead, they have more of a moody, toned down group of colors, which is a perfect array of colors for their card set. But they were still hanging on to that tradition. Now, as with the previous 2 years, the final series of 110 cards is mostly rookies and subsets. There are a few veterans in there, but for the most part, this is really dedicated to all the other cards. And the rookie cards, they still have players in their college uniforms, as had been the case before, but now the card is giving a little bit more of a focus on the team that drafted the player. Not that there's like a helmet or anything, but on the back, the text is a lot larger, and I'll even go so far as to say a lot more prominent than in previous years. But still, they were still thinking of this in terms of rookies that were prospects that were almost like afterthoughts for the set, because they wanted to get this card set out early and be the first major card set that also had rookies. And so the rookies they chose were not the rookies that were drafted correctly, but rather the rookies that they felt they could make work before they even knew exactly who was going to go where. Interesting approach, but that's the way they did it. Now, the rest of the card set was dedicated to subsets and to a couple of singular cards. Now, the first subset is Crunch Crew. This is the gold standard for Score. And the reason for that is this is the third year in a row that they did this subset. Now, the previous 2 years had a big, super colorful yellow burst of comic book impact, shall we say. And the cards were almost obnoxious in how bold they were. They're cool in their own right. Well, in 1992, they subdued it quite a bit by softening, obviously, the yellow explosion, but also the background is done in more of an elegant way. And I like to think of that as being kind of a nod to the old dot patterns of the printing of comic books. I don't think that's the reason why, but it still has a great look to it and a great feel. But you can tell that they're getting away from just how bold and upfront they are. They're trying to kind of tone everything down a little bit. Then they did a set called Sack Attack. And Sack Attack is a carryover from 1991. Now here, this looks at Sack Masters. Obviously these cards have a very different appeal than the Crunch Crew, where the Crunch Crew is all about super bold. This is more about the technique skilled players that tend to be in this group. And then they also did a third subset that went along with this theme of Little Big Men. Now, Little Big Men, this is obviously a card that is very understated, but actually understated is perfect for a card set dedicated to shorter players. So you have players like Darryl Green and Barry Sanders. Those are the players who populate this particular subset. And it is so toned down from literally everything else in the set. This is a card that doesn't look like it should be along in the set, but it's nice that they have it as kind of a break from everything else, which was way over the top. Speaking of over the top, they also did their Hall of Famer cards. This was the third year they did this, just like with Crunch Crew. In this case, these cards are really done up well. That has a nice kind of a plaque-like look to it. This is one of the most complex designs that the Score or Pinnacle had done up until this point. And this is the kind of thing where you look and you go, why didn't they just do that as an insert set? It would have looked great. Just 3-4 cards as an insert set. But instead we get to see these in the set, which is kind of helpful because they really do look good and they're fun to be able to access these cards more readily. They also did a 4-card set of the Rookie of the Year winners. Now, I find it funny that there are 4 cards for Rookie of the Year, but what I tend to forget about is there's an AFC and an NFC, and there's an offensive and a defensive Rookie of the Year, so it actually does make sense to have 4 Rookies of the Year. So this card set is absolutely designed for kids. I mean, there is no question about who the market is for these cards. I love the bright colors, really cool on these cards, but yeah, it can definitely be a bit much. But the subset that's the biggest is their 90 Plus Club cards. And this is a carryover from 1991 as well. This is a set where I wish that this was done more often, because these guys are the guys who stretch the field. They got the ball at the 10-yard line or closer to the end zone and took it all the way to the house. And there were a lot of players in the 1991 season who took it to the house. So there's a lot going on with this card set, And yeah, I really wish that they had done this card set the year that Steve Young had his truly incredible run himself, which would have been, I don't think there was a card that really celebrated that, but this is the kind of subset where you would expect to see that. Then they have 3 standalone cards, or actually 1 standalone card and then 2 highlight cards. So the standalone card is the Man of the Year card of Mark Rippon. Talk about an out-of-nowhere player. This was a really interesting case because here's a guy who hardly anybody even knew about, and suddenly he goes and wins the Super Bowl, gets MVP, and he's the talk of the town, and within a couple of years, he's a backup on the Browns. An unfortunate arc for this guy, because when you rise to the top of the entire league, you feel like you've finally made it. And he just had this 1 year, but still it was a pretty impressive year, so it's cool to see this card. They also did do a card of the Super Bowl. Now this is one of the 2 highlights cards, and so it's not a Super Bowl victory card, it's just a highlight card, but still it's a good card to complement the Mark Rippon card. But there was another highlight card, and that was for the venerable and always overlooked Warren Moon. I mean, even at the time, Warren Moon was overlooked because everybody was talking about how Randall Cunningham was the great black quarterback. But really, Randall Cunningham was a great quarterback. He absolutely was. But he wasn't quite Warren Moon. And Warren had a tremendous double year in 1990 and 1991. And so for 1991, they were celebrating just what an amazing record-breaking year, or record-setting year that he had had. And there aren't a lot of cards, and there's not a lot of conversation about Warren Moon, so I'm really glad that he got his due, that he got mentioned here. And that's the set. So for the set, you can see they still had a lot of complexity going on, but they were starting to get into inserts, and it was about time for Score to do this. They didn't get heavily into inserts. In fact, they only had 2. But the first insert was Dream Team. And Dream Team, this is an absolutely obvious choice for inserts, because in 1991, that's basically what the cards were. They just weren't more rare than the rest of the set. They sure looked like, I mean, look at this card. This is a spectacular card that absolutely needs to be celebrated on its own. So in 1992, that's what they did. They made a card that was horizontal in orientation, a big portrait of the player on one side, and then a yellow background image on the other side with him kind of silhouetted within it. The cards, surprisingly, are not glossy. They seem like they should be, but they're just frankly not, which is, it's interesting that they didn't bother to do that. I mean, not that the cards need it. I mean, they look fantastic without the high gloss. But they saved all that high gloss for their 1 per jumbo, or I think it's 3 per jumbo pack. Their the jumbo pack only release of Gridiron Stars. These cards are all really glossy, lots of gold foil, and they're really, really nice cards. Now, it is a big set with cards that came out of every single pack, so it's a set that goes together pretty quickly. So these cards really aren't worth much. But that was kind of the thing that Score and Pinnacle were doing right about this time, where they had a lot of these jumbo pack fillers, which are sets that go together really quickly. This may be the very best of all of those sets. Probably is. I think it looks gorgeous. But those were the only inserts that they bothered with in 1992. They were just starting to get going with it. But they did have 2 other special sets. Now, one of them was Young Superstars. This was an annual tradition. It was sold in a complete set form. And this card, I mean, skip right over the Trapper Keeper. This looks like a Sports Illustrated kids card. I mean, this really is geared toward kids, which for Young Superstars makes perfect sense. But you can definitely see where Score was going, or where Score was thinking that it was going, which would really only be a 1-year affair going this far toward kids. But they also had one more set, a very small set called NFL Follies, which looked at, well, basically crazy mixed up moments in sports. Just a couple of cards, and I have to say, I don't know how these cards were released. I think they were released as a complete set, I mean a complete mini set, but they're cards that you may run into, but it's pretty rare that you're going to run into them. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that, yeah, these were here, and this was part of the 1992 release. And I do also have to acknowledge that there is a Dick Butkus autograph card that is copyrighted for the year 1992. But it was released from 1993 as I understand it. So I'm going to talk about it with the 93 set. So if you ever hear about the Dick Butkus promo card or autograph card, that is, I believe, the promo card is referring to the autograph. Because I know that the Beckett does list a Dick Butkus promo card. This is the only one I've been able to find. But my understanding is this is actually a 1993 card. Regardless, so again, I'll be talking about that in the 1993 video, which I'll be doing at a later date. In the meantime, this is what I've got for 1992. Very interesting and unusual card set for score, even across all of the sports, but definitely for football, very unusual. So I wish that there was more to talk about because they were just starting to have a lot of fun with stuff and go into a new area of card creation that they hadn't in the past. But that's not the case, and so we're going to be seeing things really build out more with inserts in the years, or in the videos to come as the years progressed. So definitely look out for those videos. Now, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I do urge you to do so. Thank you very much for watching.